Hello, in this presentation we'll be going over the National 5 Course Specification. This is the guide that teachers have to use to ensure that we're teaching the right materials for that final exam. Now, as you can see, valid from session 2017 to 18, this is the most up-to-date version. It kind of tells us all the content that needs to be in the courses that could potentially be assessed in the final exam. Also, when you ask why are we doing this, this is why. It's in this document. Now, there's lots of information you don't need to know about in it, but the key bit is down here. Democracy in Scotland and the UK for section 1. Now we do democracy in the UK, option 2. And as you've seen in the past paper already, there are different parts and questions that you will have to answer for that. But these are the potential areas that we have to cover. Power and decision making. We have to talk about the features of a democratic society. So what kind of things are you able to have? So if your rights and your responsibilities. We have to look at devolved and reserved matters and also how, for example, reserved matters fit into the UK as a whole, but also how the devolved may cause some issues within that. And of course we need to know what the powers of the Prime Minister is and also what the role of the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson as it is just now at this time of this recording. We also need to look at the rights and responsibilities of individuals and also opportunities for individuals as well to get involved in things. So that's looking at things like pressure groups, interest groups in America, but in the UK, remember, it's pressure groups. And also we need to look at elections and campaigning. So basically how people can get involved in elections, the political parties and the media as well. We also need to look at influence areas, so the media and pressure groups or trade unions. Now, we look at pressure groups, we don't touch trade unions. So we will mention them slightly just in case, but the reality is we focus more on the media and pressure groups themselves. Now, study of the group organisation chosen should focus on the role, purpose, aims, methods and critical evaluation of the extent of which influence is exercised in democracy. In other words, basically, how do they get involved? What's their purpose? What kind of methods do they use to try and influence people? Now, looking at representation, we have to look at what the role of MPs are. We need to look at the representation of women and minority groups. Are they effectively represented or not? We also need to look at the House of Lords, why it's there and how it's made up. For voting systems, we also need to look at, it says, outcomes of the system used to elect MPs in the UK Parliament, including the strengths and weaknesses of the system. And for the strengths and weaknesses, we need to mention at least one other system. Otherwise, how can you say it's weaker than that? So we will be looking at things like AMS and potentially STV as well, because it's the only way you can actually do a strength and weakness if you can compare it to a second one. Now, the second section is all about social issues. And you can see here, there is potential for social inequality and crime and law. We look at crime and law, but it says here, for course assessment, knowledge and understanding and critical evaluation of social inequalities of crime and law must be able to be applied across at least two of the following groups: social class, age, gender and minority groups. So we always need to factor in that we need to be able to talk about different groups and about how they're affected by it. Now, this actually looks slightly easier at first. So the nature and extent of crime in Scotland are the UK. So is it, for example, focused in around certain areas, or is it increasing? Is it decreasing? Is it more concentrated in certain areas, like areas of poverty and things? Geography, cities, is it? Or is it rural area? And obviously evidence of crime in Scotland, such as official reports and academic reports and research. So we do need to know a little bit of background about how it's all recorded. We need to look at causes of crime. Social, economic and biological causes. This is a question that comes up now and again. Now, key things is, as we go through the course, we will tell you which ones they fit into. Sometimes they'll give you a cause, but sometimes, to make it a bit trickier, they might just say one of the two causes. Also, consequences of crime on all of these groups. Perpetrators, the person who's done the crime. The victims, families of victims or perpetrators, communities themselves, and of course, wider society. Moving down, we also need to look at, that's right, a second page, the role and structure of the criminal courts, including the children's hearing system. What powers do the courts have, including the children's hearing system, and how effective they are at tackling crime. Does it stop crime? Are people rehabilitated, or are there real issues around that? We also need to look at who has responded to crime. The government, what they've done and how effective it's been. The police, what they're able to do and how effective it is. And prisons. What's the purpose? How effective? And also alternatives to prison. So that's like electronic tagging and things. Now, all of these areas need to be covered. So there will be a lot of content in this. And then for the third section, we look at international world power. Okay, and it says here the major world power must be drawn from one of the G7 countries, excluding the UK, or one of the following: Brazil, China, India, Russia, or South Africa. Now we do the USA. USA is a very nice, easy one to do. We already know a little bit of background about it, and it also has some similarities that we can cross over with. So we need to know, for example, the political system. What kind of system do they have? They also have a democracy. But more than that, what else aspects is there about the political system? How do people take part, and how are people represented in it? Influence on other countries, we need to look at political, economic, and military influence that the USA has on other countries. So basically, how can it make governments do things? How has it an impact, for example, through trade and things? But also military influence could be about how people want to be an ally with them. So that's areas like potentially NATO, about helping out, for example, in Syria, but also why people might not want to go to war with them. You can see here a minimum of 3 issues of social and economic issues must be done. Okay? Because there's multiples there, and there's no way you get them all done, so we have to do at least 3 of these. So when we do them, and you're like, oh, why are we having to do so many? Remember, there are potentially 6. We've cut it down from 6. We used to do 6, not anymore, because they made that a bit easier. We also need to look at a minimum of tackling these issues, and once again, you'll see there's the same 6, so therefore we keep to the same 3. So we look at basically what the issues are and how effective they are as well. And then the last bit, all it does is talk about the assignment, but we'll talk about the assignment more in greater detail when we get to that. Thank you.